How long they've been waiting
for a while. But hey,
Okay.
let's roll, man. Let's
Let me
roll.
give my apologies.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the Undisputed Era, the guy who went on NXT, the guy who was on ROH. This guy was on AEW. You were on MLW also. You were in so many other wrestling, man. But how's it going, Bobby Fish?
Things are good. Things are a bit hectic on my end. And so I want to extend my sincerest apologies to you and to anybody who was waiting on me. Not the most adult behavior on my part, getting on here a little bit late. So I certainly do apologize, but things are good, man. Things are busy. Things are very, very busy. That's really what it kind of comes down to. So every once in a while, I stop to take a breath, and then something like this happens. So no rest for the wicked.
Yeah, better late than never, like they say.
Yeah, I suppose, but that's just such an amateur move. It's to be honest, it's embarrassing.
I mean, you were a late bloomer when you came into professional wrestling, right?
I got started late for sure by professional wrestling standards. I think my first match I was 25, which
that's late bloomer kind of.
Yeah, it is kind of, and then you look at a guy like DDP, and that's obviously not the ideal situation,
Rico.
but. Yeah. Rico is another one. Yes, sir. I find Dallas so inspirational in for a lot of reasons, but also, I mean, just the man is like, he will not take no for an answer. Like, he will find a way, and that's a true special trait in a human being, because I think we're as humans, the negative part is, you could have 100 nice things said about you, but what we focus on, and it's just natural human behavior, is you focus on the one bad thing that was said. The 80 great things that were said, you kind of you brush off. It just is what it is. So for him to be able to be so positive, and I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I want to say Dallas didn't have his first match until he was in his early 30s.
I mean, I think he started his first match when he was 35 or 36, if I'm mistaken.
Yeah, I mean,
but Rico did it at almost at 40 years old, I believe.
Really? First match? Wow.
I think he actually started in the territory at 38 years old, but he was wrestling under the developmental territory, and then he started debuting when he was 40, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it truly comes down to when I was on the come up, WWE, they were not an option if you were north of 30 and if you were under 6 foot. So, and those were my, during my early years. So I kind of looked towards Japan and some other things. And if somebody had said to me at that time, hey, you're going to work for WWE and you're going to be there, blah, 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 and explained any of it, and then said, but it's not going to happen until you're north of 40 years old, I would have been you're out of your mind. But that's exactly what happened. So, things do change. I'm not, this is no public service announcement by any means. And I'd like to think that my talent had something to do with things. But if there were a lot of points from A to B where, it was it just seemed to make more sense to throw in the towel. And if I did, there's a lot of stuff, I wouldn't have been a part of some of the things that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of. So.
I mean, you started off doing other stuff. So you were a mixed martial arts also.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing martial arts since I was 8 years old. I started with Taekwondo. A lot of people start there, and then it morphed into other things. And I've competed a few times, amateur. I was fortunate enough in November to have my first professional boxing match. It was part of the Floyd Mayweather undercard, and it was in Dubai, of all places.
Oh, wow. That's the expensive country, I've heard.
Yeah, man. Yes, it is. And it was very, very cool. They flew my wife over with me. They flew my coach over, my agent. And I got to go and compete. And that's something that I've been doing since I was a kid, and have realized um, my appetite for just like actually competing. It's not about the whether you win, whether you lose. You always want to win, obviously, but just competing, like truly one man against the other.
I mean, competing at that next level, man. Like at your 40s, you're still doing it. But I mean, when did you started doing the group with the undisputed guys? I mean, I know you've been doing it with them with ROH and other promotions, but when did that became a click?
Well, so behind the scenes, we were always tight. Adam and Kyle they tagged before I was ever part of ROH, and Roddy and I had known each other from tours that we did for Pro Wrestling Noah. So when I came into Ring of Honor and they made Kyle and I a tag team, as that was kind of starting to take shape. Um, Behind the scenes, not on screen, but like the four of us were all friends, and we wrestle against each other, we wrestled with each other, and
Friendly competition, and that's what makes it interesting. Like when you have that vibe and that connection, it just
yeah.
stands out.
Well, and they had a master kind of plan for Kyle and Adam. They built to it for a couple of years almost to get to the last show of the year. Are they the Manhattan Mayhems that they were, or whatever? But I know it was always at the Hammerstein, and Hunter Delirious was planning that, and so we were always connected in some way. So when it came to going to NXT, Roddy was already there, and Kyle and I were coming in thinking they might put us as a tag team because that's what we had been doing, especially for New Japan. And
It's the chemistry that matters. Like you guys had that chemistry, so it's like
yeah, well, Kyle and I were pretty aware of ours, and Kyle and Adam had their own. Um, and we had an inkling that the three of us did, only because for a brief time in Ring of Honor towards the end, when they were building towards Kyle and Adam's rivalry, they had us become a unit, like a three-person unit for a couple of weeks, and it was part of the story that was unfolding with Adam and Kyle. However, the reaction in the building was pretty visceral. Like, I mean, it was you. I noticed it, and I actually went to the office afterwards and was like, "Listen, I'm not in any way asking you to change your plans in the end, but maybe we see where this goes. And then if it is in the end, Adam turning on Kyle or vice versa, like it'll just add more, fuel to the fire, so to speak." And they didn't want to do it. And I don't blame them. I mean, Hunter, this was his baby, and he had plotted it out because he's good at long-term storytelling, which to me is the most needed skill in booking pro wrestling. And so to come to WWE and have them put the three of us together was kind of like, okay, uh, where's the like rib? Like this is a joke, right? You're not going to actually because this is what we would have asked for. But just smarter, more brilliant minds than ours saw something, and I would say that another Hunter, not Hunter Johnston, but Hunter Hurst Helmsley, I have to imagine he saw something and was smart enough to put us together.
yeah, I mean, he saw the talent, so it had to be a group of guys that were kind of like young up and coming guys, but you were more of the savvy vet. You were the guy that was more seasoned, but you were kind of more of that mentor, the brother of those guys, huh?
Well, what's interesting about it is that we all kind of started around the same time. I would say that maybe Roddy might even have more years in the business than I do, but he's younger than me because I did get that late jump. I played football in college, so I had finished playing all of my college football, and then I um, stayed another year to get my bachelor's degree because I didn't know what I was going to do. And pro wrestling, I didn't know was going to be my career. So the late start was, yeah, it was because I had put it on hold to go to college and play football and, be a regular civilian. um, and so getting started late, but my experience level was kind of on par, and we all kind of came up together. And what I found when they put Kyle and I together is we just shared a very similar sense of humor, very similar in just a lot of ways. I mean, we hit it off, and we've been buds ever since. And I would say the same for Kyle or for Adam and Roddy as well. That I think the group worked because we were truly four guys that were as tight as we appeared to be. It wasn't manufactured. There was nothing uh, quote unquote fake about it.
No, it's like you guys have that friendship off the ring, so you guys had some type of bond. So usually when you have that friendship and you guys know how to work with each other, it kind of comes a long ways. And then the fact you guys became a faction, it's like I think it's still one of the most popular groups. Like you kind of have the thing called the Undisputed Era, which was run by Triple H, but you guys had a thing, and then it went into AEW also. So that was intriguing. And then you had your title match in TNA. I thought you had a really good match with
Josh Alexander.
Josh Alexander. I thought you had a really good match by far. I thought that was one of your.
I Go ahead, sir.
I thought you had one of your best performance match by far when you went against Josh Alexander.
Well, Josh, back in the Red Dragon days in Ring of Honor, we had wrestled Josh, and he's in AEW now. Ethan Page.
Ethan Page, yeah,
And
he's another.
when they were tagging, and we had I think 2 matches with them, and they we had good chemistry with them. So I figured going back to have that match with Josh, I expected it to be good. I know Josh is talented, and I know he's easy to work with, which I'd like to think I am as well. So when your initial discussions go with people like, oh, this is going to be fun. And then there's some people that you're like, no, this is going to actually be work. So with Josh, I knew it was going to be a good time, and I knew we'd have a good one. And yeah, you're right. I think we did. And thank you for the compliment on that.
Yeah, it was a really good match. It looked like you could have won the match, but I think there was a lot of those matches that could have gone either way. But then, I mean, you've done a lot of wrestling promotions, but what was the difference when you went to those different promotions, like from the start of ROH? What was it like over there?
The startup of Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
Well, for me, Ring of Honor was just kind of flirting with the TV deals then, and they had certain TV, was it HD Net, and I had a few dark matches, but I had never, and I had history going back with Ring of Honor, but it wasn't really performing. I was one of Tony DeVito's guys. He trained me. And Tony was working for Ring of Honor back before they ever had a TV deal or anything. But Tony was very much one of the OGs. And so when I did actually get a contract, it was when Hunter had control of things. Sinclair was taken over. Actually, Jim Cornette was there for the first couple weeks. And then whatever the falling out was that Jim had with Sinclair, and I liked working for Jim too. I mean, Christ, I watched him growing up. He was one of the best managers,
Oh yeah,
ever.
he's one of the most controversial ones when it comes to like he'll give you his real take and he'll tell you like it is, man. But he just doesn't like that fake wrestling stuff. That's what he criticized the most.
Well, I mean, everybody, that's the thing for me is I steer clear of the dirt because to me, it's an insult to the business. And I don't know how Jim would view it, but I think that guys from that era, like, kayfabe was a huge thing then. And you do have to evolve. So you got to get in line with the times. But I think that what we are witnessing now with some of where pro wrestling is that there was some value in that kayfabe. And I don't you can never put the cat back in the bag, right? So
Yeah, you can
to
never.
to kind of go against the grain, and some people, got very over by breaking kayfabe, but I think the breaking of kayfabe has so been overdone that it's kind of passe at this point. And even though you can't put the rabbit back in the hat, I think that there's some room for kayfabe to come back, and for fans and performers alike to all just kind of get in line with it. Like, the dirt is not the news. It's not the information, it's the storylines. It's like the bloodline is so well done, and it will keep you entertained if, as a fan, you're willing to go, okay, I'm accepting of what you're giving me. This is the bad guy, this is the good guy, or this guy, he kind of turned on his buddy, and like, go there. The dirt sheets should not have this like existence that they do have, and guys like Meltzer, um and these other dirt sheet writers, like, it's created an industry for them, and it's, to be honest, it's kind of slimy.
They're
um
like the TMZ of the way they do their stuff over there.
Well, if there's no checks and balances, your stories don't have to have any realism to them, and you're affecting real people's lives. Because listen, at the end of the day, like, I'm a dad, I'm a husband. I'm
Human
all
being.
those things first. So when you write some fake story about me, trying to talk Kyle and Adam into leaving to come back to WWE, and then it becomes like gospel. Why? Because fans care more about the dirt sheets, unfortunately. Not all of them either, because it's not everybody. And to be honest, it's probably more of a minority, but they're just more vocal, I guess. Um, but it becomes the story, and it's
It
like,
affects.
it's irresponsible journalism on Meltzer and anyone who writes for him to publish those stories without checking facts. And they're definitely not checking facts, because there's no way. I mean, there's that one story in particular, because it's about me. Like, there's zero truth whatsoever to that. Even AEW turned around and was truthful about it and said, like, no, he didn't. But yet there's still fans that'll swear on their kids that I tried to get Adam and Kyle to go back to WWE, and it didn't work, or blah blah blah. And it all comes from just dirt sheets.
I mean, it would have to come from you personally. Like if you said it, like I think they just try to think, well, since you have that connection with those other people, maybe you were trying to convince them, and I guess that's how they make money with all that fake stuff. Like you got to
That's
get
how they make
you
money.
got to get the real stuff. Like
Well, and go ahead, sir,
oh no,
please.
my bad. But like you said, you got to get it from the actual person who that was falsely reported or actually was said.
Well, and here's the real kick in the head to this whole thing. It's pro wrestling. So at its best, it's like a movie. You know what I mean? And I don't want to betray the people who came before me, like the Fit Finleys and the William Regals, and the people who fed their families with this business, because kayfabe was keeping kayfabe affected their bottom line. And the only reason why I'll even kind of go here is because it's already been so overdone. But like, what our business is storytelling. And for people to like get wrapped up and take it as serious as they do, it's kind of crazy. And then to think that, like, you can't have it both ways, you
Hey,
know like, a fan can't come up to me or anyone else and say, I love your heel work. Okay, so you're now using very inside baseball terminology, which I'm sure makes somebody like Fit Finley cringe.
yeah,
However, You can't do that and then think that I'm somehow a bad person because of something I did on screen when I was a heel. Like you're either inside baseball or you're not. And to be honest, I think from a fan standpoint, I'd rather not be. I don't want to know. Like I when I was a kid, that's when I loved wrestling the most. And that's when I didn't really know. I mean, I had an idea that something was, I don't know, something's off. This doesn't look like, you know, the UFC, but I wasn't sure. And
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think,
yeah, it became more of something that you were interested. Like, when you were watching, like, I mean, watching during the Attitude Era and those other wrestling things, like WCW Wars, that was something you would want to tune in for, right? Like the Battle of the Wars, the territories, and all that stuff.
I mean, yeah, that was the stuff I came up on for sure. NWA, what would later become WCW, um, those years, like late '80s into the early '90s, were. And I love WWF too. Don't get me wrong. When I was a kid, man, I would watch any wrestling, world class, AWA. Like I watched it all. It didn't matter. But the NWA stuff, Dusty Rhodes, the War Games, Tully and Arn, the Four Horsemen, God, the establishment of the Great Muta, um, Sting. These were things that the Road Warriors. These were things that really just they got me as a fan, hook, line, and sinker. I believed all of it, and I loved it all. And it's kind of unfortunate that like today's pro wrestling, people aren't able to have the same sort of experience that I had then because so much has been exposed.
It's been exposed by character, like how you said it. So it's like it's hard to tell which is legit or not, but we always want to make it believable as fans. But well, how was your time in Japan? Because you said you were working towards NOAH, right?
I worked for NOAH early on in my career. First time I went over there was 2006. I worked for them 8 years, I believe. Um, and then when I started working Ring of Honor and Red Dragon started to get over, New Japan inquired about bringing us over for them, and we did, and that was my first time for New Japan, and that experience over the course of the 2 or so years that we worked for them was awesome. Um, Japan is just and will always be such a special place to me. If somebody had said to me when I was a kid, because I was very into martial arts, very into ninjas specifically at one time in my life, and ninjas are a Japanese thing. Um, if somebody had told that child, like, yeah, you're going to go to Japan like 100 times, I would have never believed it. But sure enough, here I sit, and that's been my life. So I'm a fortunate person for sure.
Well, isn't Japanese wrestling a lot more stiff and more tough at this pro wrestling level?
Yes, the difference is it's a bit more physical and a bit less theatrical, but it's also evolved. So, and when I say a little bit less theatrical, I mean if you watch like a Tokyo Dome show or something, the entrances and whatnot, they are not they are no less than WWE. Like they spare no expense, but the fans there, because of just the mentality of the Japanese culture, um, they don't make a lot of noise during the matches. They sit and they watch respectfully. So there is more of a focus on the technique that is on display. And then it bleeds over into the psychology of, I'm not even going to say wrestling, but the psychology of the country, which is like just to fight against the odds. There is no giving up, like Bushido and the samurai culture has such influence on even modern day Japan, and it was like if you were dishonored, you took your own life. So it was, yeah. I think the psychology there comes from some of that. Therefore, you have, you know, to fight from underneath, like you have to have the odds stacked against you. And the best way to have the odds stacked against you, in my opinion, when it comes to pro wrestling, is for somebody to, to put it on you. And if they're putting it on you and you're fighting back, there shouldn't be any daylight. I mean, let's
I
make
mean,
this as, let's make this what it's supposed to be.
yeah, it's a physical style of wrestling, like from what I was told, a little hardcore style. I mean, but have you ever like done any like wrestling promotions in Puerto Rico? Because I heard that's a little more intense.
Puerto Rico, from what I've heard, is a bit more violent.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know. I've not been over there myself. I just did a couple shows over the past couple years in Mexico for the first time. I
I
just
want
did one
some
in
tough ones too.
Tijuana, and I did one in was it AAA Triple Mania last year or whatever. It was when I not maybe not last year. It was when I was with AEW. I went, and those were all very cool experiences. But Puerto Rico's a place I've never worked. I had a very good friend of mine, Bison Smith, who I worked with in NOAH, the late Bison Smith. He was living in Puerto Rico for a good amount of time, for a long time. I think like almost 10 years. And that's actually where he passed away, was Puerto Rico. And he grew to love Puerto Rico. So I
I
don't
mean,
know. I mean,
the passion, the culture of those fans. I've heard different like mixed reviews of those fans and all that stuff. But what? So what? So okay. What was the most fun times in the wrestling business that you enjoyed the most? Like just from your time from those guys you were working with. Who was the one guy you enjoyed working with in wrestling matches?
working, I mean, the easy answer is Kyle O'Reilly,
Ooh.
because we had such chemistry before Red Dragon, before Ring of Honor. We worked for Evolve Wrestling, and it was booked by Gabe Sapolsky. And Gabe kind of handpicked us. I don't want to be corny about it, but like he wanted a certain vibe for Evolve, and he had described it, and it really kind of fit Kyle and I to a T. It was a very martial arts, almost had that sort of like the way Japan, I think has always tried to have like a pro wrestling martial arts hybrid shoot and work aren't even really a thing in Japan. Like it's just such a blurry thing. Um, and that's kind of what Evolve was. So for Kyle and I, we were the first match in Evolve, like the first match out of the gate against each other. We had chemistry whether we fought against each other or fought with each other. Um, we had such a fun time doing some of the outer ring stuff that we would get to do, and it was just really just us making each other laugh. So I would say, yeah, if there's any chemistry I look back on, that's been the most fun, is definitely the one that existed between him and I.
So Kyle O'Reilly and you guys were building some good matches, and then you had that good tag team chemistry. So that makes a lot of sense because you guys had that different type of style, but it had that similar physicality a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what we bonded on, and when we were wrestling against each other, we didn't know how similar. I think when we started tagging together, and it was like, okay, well, we got to have this, let's come up with some double teams and stuff, and then that's when it really started to click, and it was like, holy shit, okay, like, But even though we were very similar, we also had very distinct, differences. Like Kyle would strike and grapple, I would strike and grapple, but Kyle was a little bit more the grappler, and I was a little bit more of the striker. So we weren't carbon copies, but we were similar, and I
Yeah.
think it's part of why it worked.
Well, if you think about it, your mixed martial arts type of stuff and all that stuff, you're more of a striker, so that makes more
Mhm.
sense. The way you would hit somebody, you do your kicks, all
Mhm.
that physicality. I guess Kyle O'Reilly was more of a grapple than what you were.
He was, but I mean, Kyle can also throw some mean kicks himself, So we had a lot of double teams that were, both of us just literally kicking people. And Kyle's are, they're definitely right up there. He's not faking it in any way. I mean, this is stuff he trains, and that's my thing too. I think we worked well because we're both martial artists. We both still train. I don't think either of us see martial arts as something that we'll ever stop doing. So it was like, yeah, I mean, of course it works.
I mean, there's quite a few wrestlers who still do that stuff, but I've seen you had your matches with Brian Danielson. What was what was it like working with that guy?
Brian was always a blast to work with. Again, because he trains. So like I think that's the misnomer when it comes to pro wrestling is like I think having done it as long as I have now, if you can do it the right way, to me is like you got to get your pro wrestling foundation. Once you have your base, however long that takes, because it's different for everybody, and I just think there's no replacement for repetition. So you're going to get good at this or get better at this when it happens, not before. Um, Once you have that, it's up to you to start adding whatever your flavor of is, so that it becomes yours. And for me, martial arts was the obvious choice because I've done it since I was 8 years old, and to see guys like Brian, to see Muda was probably the one that influenced me the most at my youngest phase. But when I was getting into where I was actually starting to wrestle, because I worked for NOAH, I was front and center so many times in matches, getting hit by this person, but was Kenta. Kenta influenced the hell out of me. I would say you don't have to look too hard at Brian's stuff to realize that Kenta influenced Brian too. Samoa Joe was another guy that, like, man, somebody his size to be able to do the things that he could do, and his martial arts proficiency, it's obvious. Like, the man trains. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Like, if you got to add a flavor that's going to be intrinsically you, well, then it should be something that you train, something that you have reps in. Like, when you parade this out on television for the world to see, it shouldn't be the first time you're throwing this technique.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen wrestlers like this that come and go like that, but Ken Sharp to me was one of those guys that just stood out to me because of the way he had that physicality, that little brawler mentality. But then you had Steve Blackman, who was just a physical karate guy.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was in today's era, they would have been put over easily.
Well, and both of these guys they're legitimate martial artists. So that's the key. Everyone we've talked about, everyone we've named, from Brian Danielson to Ken Shamrock to Kyle
Dan Severn,
O'Reilly, yeah, Dan Severn, are legitimate martial artists. Boss Rutan was a guy that in Japan had some worked matches too, but Boss was a guy that I mean, I've been a Boss Rutan fan for as long as I can remember. And these, that's the common thread. I think there's no substitution for putting in the repetitions, and then it looks the way it's supposed to look. And then along the way, you start to figure out, okay, this is my legitimate martial arts technique, and I can hurt people with this. Um, and I can find a way to make it, we're going to say, just more agreeable to pro wrestling, and that takes repetition. You've got to break a few eggs to make the omelet, right? Like,
yeah.
you're gonna hit people a little too hard sometimes. I mean, I've I've hit people way too hard sometimes. I've been hit way too hard sometimes. Um, but really, what's too hard? It's all relative, right? Because
It's all
I
relative.
didn't, I didn't get into pro wrestling to, go out and do some choreographed dance. To me, this is a sport, and I treat it as a sport. And is there, room for the being able to talk and all the other stuff? Sure, of course. And you gotta do your part. You gotta talk people into wanting to see the fight, right? I mean, that's a key element to mixed martial arts and boxing and anything else. But um, at the end of the day, I appreciate the athleticism. I appreciate the true martial artists in Brian Danielson, in Samoa Joe, in Kyle O'Reilly. These are men that I respect in our industry 100%. Kenta, immense respect for Kenta.
I mean, there's a lot of those guys that have that background, but I mean, looking back, I mean, what are you doing currently in the business? Are you still competing, or are you kind of just like taking a break from wrestling or retiring?
Well, I had no. I'm still wrestling. I'm working independently. When I did the boxing match in November, when that came in, kind of fell into place, it came out of nowhere. So I looked at things and thought to myself, like, okay, I was with AEW. Prior to that, I was with WWE. Prior to that, I was with Ring of Honor. Um, I've kind of spent the last decade contracted to somebody. And it's nice to have that contract for sure. However, I looked at, an opportunity to fight a professional boxing match on the Floyd Mayweather undercard if I was still under contract to somebody. If I had re-signed with AEW at that time, I would have had to ask permission to do it, and they could have told me no. So I was like, let me see what other opportunities are out there. And um, there have been other opportunities, and I'm kind of, while I'm still wrestling independently, I'm figuring out some of these other opportunities, and I'm excited about a lot of them.
So there's other options for other promotions that want to sign you, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see where it goes. I'm also, what I found that, I've been doing seminars and stuff, and what I really didn't anticipate was how much I enjoy um, kind of coaching and giving back a little bit of the knowledge, because I think we as performers who's been doing this as long as we have, we start to take that knowledge for granted, and we're around our peers, so everybody knows the stuff. But when you are exposed to people that are still on the come up, you realize, like, oh wow, there is stuff that they don't know, that, like, not only do I know it, but like I kind of take it for granted. So I've found it to be a real rewarding experience to kind of give some of that back. And I would like to do more of that, I think.
It
Um,
gives you that freedom to do a little bit of something. I mean, you got to do boxing, like you said, so you got to do a little bit of more. But
Well,
this
we'll see. I mean, the company I fought for with that, we were supposed to do two fights, and then they kind of went on a little bit of a hiatus. Seems like they're coming back to do another event, and may have another one come next year, which I have a two-fight contract with them. So if they do another event after this next one, I should be fighting. And
oh,
if
so you get two more fights. Oh, that's got to build something into it. That's a good
one more fight I'm contracted for. One more
well, one
fight.
more fight. Okay, one more
But
fight.
the next card that they're supposed to be doing, I won't be on. But the one after that, because it's a bigger show, like with a bigger budget, we're gonna try to get that sorted out. But
Oh,
I mean, I'm also like, I'm up for. I'd like to fight a few more times. I'd really like to get a kickboxing fight in. I was 3-1 as an amateur in kickboxing. I'd like to get another one or two or 10 of those in, and these bare knuckle things keep popping up, and, like, I don't know. I'm not opposed.
I mean, you're just having the luxury to do what you want, but I'm pretty sure maybe down the road you'll get back to Click. Maybe you'll come back later once you finish your exploring, right?
Once I finish what, sir?
Once you finish your exploring with all the other stuff, like you're doing boxing and other stuff. So,
I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I'm just trying to, money talks. So, like for me, it really at this point, I think pro wrestling was a passion of mine as a younger man, and now I'm hitting a point in my career where really it's got to make financial sense because I'm very satisfied with everything I've been blessed enough to do, and I'm grateful for the career that I've had, and I'm grateful for like the places I've seen, the people I've met, some of the things I've had the opportunity to do. That I'm an upstate kid from, an upstate New York kid from Albany. So to see the world the way that I have, and experience some of what I have. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a fireman. We were blue collar. I don't think any of us anticipated this life for me, but it's been pretty cool.
I mean, coming from the capital city of New York, I mean, it's got to be the dream. You got to, you got to do everything. So it's like you did other stuff. You went to a lot of wrestling promotions. You had a lot of fun journey. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you did mostly a little bit of everything, but then you did boxing. So it's got to be kind of interesting to show that versatility, like you could do more than just those other sports, like a lot of people would prefer to do one basic sport, but you're kind of like that multi guy.
Well, I mean, you're always evolving, or you're slowly dying, And I spent the first, like I was doing martial arts, but coming up all the way through high school and college, like football became all encompassing. It was my life. I lived every year on that schedule of, you know, double sessions, and then the season, and then off season, blah, blah, blah. And football was everything to me. Um, but you don't stay. Like, nothing's forever. The good times aren't going to last. The bad times aren't going to last. I mean, that's what this world is. We live it. We get one go around. um, you know you need it's easy to get wrapped up in the negative, but that's also where, like, to me, my faith comes in. And what I've realized the most is that, like, no matter if it's good time or not so good time, it's all temporary because it's not on our schedule. It's on his schedule. So I might be looking at something that's right in front of me and be like, "Oh man, this sucks," and get really down on myself or my life or my whatever. But I got to remember, like, it may look this way to me here, but he's got it all planned out. And this may be preparing me for what's to come, that's going to be everything I expect it to be, or maybe it exceeds it. And maybe it exceeds it because I'm going through some shit right now. So I think it's just kind of learning to navigate this stuff evenly, not get too excited, not get too upset. Just be a good person. That's one of the things that I find so discouraging, is when people just don't treat other people well. Like, it's so much easier. It actually takes effort to be a dickhead to people.
I mean, we look at human beings as human beings, but like, I mean, everybody's human, but everybody just treats them like they are something. Like I can just tell, just besides you being a heel, there's a good human being inside. I mean, outside the ring. So I mean, there's got
Mhm.
to be that human being, but you keep it like as a kayfabe. So I get it, man. So I might have to look at you in the arena, and I might say, man, screw this guy. But then
Mm.
outside the ring, he seemed like a nice guy. So it probably just seems more like. But you do have. I mean, you seem more of a well accomplished man. There's just a lot of athletes that can't say, "Oh, I did this, I did that." I mean, there's quite a few guys I've interviewed that did pro wrestling, but I would say, hey, you did everything. you're still doing it. So that's pretty big. I mean, a lot of guys that get up in age, they tend to decline or slow down. But I guess,
Right.
like they say, the older you get, the wiser you get, and the smarter you get, is what they say.
Well, I mean, I'm sure, it's just it's biology. I'd be, uh, you know, probably giving myself way too much credit to think that like, oh, I'm just as good right now as I've ever been. Like I am. I'm 46 years old, but I feel great. I love what I do. And that comes to, whether it be wrestling, whether it be kickboxing, whether it be like martial arts is something I'll do until I'm dead. Um, and training and stuff is just something that I'll never not do, exercise. I'm working on getting my DDP yoga certification. Um, because it's helped me so much, and it's like, well, if I can kind of give that back to other people, like I don't I'd be a bigger asshole not to. um
I mean, DDP has given so much to those other wrestlers and a lot of other people. He's changed lives. I mean, you would think this guy does not look anywhere near his 60s. He looks like he's like in his 40s or a little younger, man.
the man, in my opinion, and I don't want to like this is going to be overblown, but from what I've seen of the man and how he treats other people, he's like an angel come to earth, man. Like he's all about, like, some of the way that he has helped these people with his system that were physically, um disabled in certain ways, and then defeated mentally, where like they just weren't able to take that first step. And sometimes the first step is the most important, because it's the one that people fear the most. It's the one that people think like, okay, well, I don't know what step 2, 3, and 4 look like, so I'm not going to take step 1. But the people that are successful, the truth is most people don't know what steps 2, 3, and 4 look like when they take step 1. You start to figure it out each step. And I think DDP's going a long way in making people realize that, and making people, believe in themselves. And it's like, the small victories. And then next thing you know, it's a year later, and like it turns into a big victory. And then you check off another box and another box. And like, the man certainly doesn't have to be the human being he is, but I applaud and I appreciate the human being he is. I
Yeah.
mean, and he was one of my sponsors for my fight in Dubai. Like, and he was, when I reached out to him about it, like there was no hesitation in his answer. It was, yeah, of course.
I mean,
And
you
that,
can't pass on this legend. I mean, this guy he's a Hall of Famer. He's done it all. I mean, this guy is an inspiration no matter how people look at it. But interesting question. Dark Side of the Ring. I guess in this recent episode, what's your thoughts on what Vince Russo said? I guess in the recent Dark Side of the Ring, Vince Russo says you can't be a nice guy in wrestling because it's a shark tank to survive due to be a shark. Or what's your opinion on that?
well, I think, there's probably some truth to that. There are a good amount of scumbags in wrestling, and it does at times. It's like any other microcosm of our larger society. Sometimes the scumbags get ahead. I mean, it just is what it is. Um, and then there's other guys who get their due, that are good human beings. Brian Danielson has been nothing but a decent human being from what I've ever known or seen, and he got his flowers, so to speak. You look at a guy like Sami Zayn. Um, Sammy, was always such a friendly, gregarious, like great personality, and for him to now be doing some of the best work of his career, it's amazing. I don't think it's impossible, but I think that, yeah, you got a lot of scumbags in wrestling, so I don't think Vince Russo's necessarily wrong. But I don't, does it make it a little bit harder to survive if you're a good human being? Maybe. But at the end of the day, like, pro wrestling is only supposed to be this small part of your life, like I'm dad and I'm my wife's husband before I'm Bobby Fish, the pro wrestler. Like, so am I going to sacrifice those things and be be truly a kind of a shitty person just so that I can be successful in pro wrestling? Like, no, I'm not. I'll trade one for the other. I can stop wrestling tomorrow. I don't. Whatever. I
Yeah.
want to be a good human being. I'm a Christian. I'm a God fearing man. I love the people I love. I will protect the people I love. I will speak up for myself, for the people I care about. I will call bullshit when I see it. I will say no. I mean, I will not undervalue myself. I will not. There's principles I live by, and if you're if you have a lack of values and whatnot, then I guess that maybe that works for you, and that's a way to get by in pro wrestling. But I've been doing this 20 some odd years, and I'm never going to be one of those scumbags. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, just stay by your true colors, I guess. Like how some people would prefer. You can get anywhere. Like look at Brian Danielson. He got to the top because he earned his dues by being who he was. I mean, since you've been wrestling for 20 some years, like a long time, was there like any other ribs or locker room incidents that you were involved with, or you just saw that just like, man, like what the hell's wrong with this guy?
um, no, no. I mean, nothing comes to mind. Um, Yeah, and I think a lot of those things too. I think one is pro wrestling, so things get exaggerated quite a bit. But I think also some of those things are, they're stories for the boys and they're stories for the locker room, and they're not. They shouldn't, when the dirt sheets really get rolling and they get a hold of stuff and they blow things up, and it's like, you know there should be some sanctity to the locker room. That is our space as the boys, as the performers, or the girls, whatever
So
you
you
consider.
respectfully just keep it as low key. That's respectful.
I think so. I think, yeah, yeah. And if you got a good locker room where everybody gets along, like I could speak nothing but good things about the NXT locker room and the New Japan locker room and the Ring of Honor locker room. So like, those are the ones I'm gonna think about when it comes
Oh,
to
what is the
those
best rib
questions.
you've ever seen in person?
The best rib?
Yeah.
Um Smoky Bones used to have a good set of ribs.
Oh wow.
Smoky Bones, the restaurant, they still got those. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, ribs are kind of a thing of the past. Ribs are something that I think you had a lot of back in the day, and then you had a lot of the like the guys that came before us. They would talk about them, and because pro wrestling has turned into this like inside baseball thing, like a lot of fans want to know the ribs. I do have one that was very lighthearted, and it really, because I know everybody involved, really made me smile, made me laugh, but. Matt Taven told one of where he worked in Mexico. Mark and Jay Briscoe had worked there recently too for like some similar thing. And they had these huge, like 3-story advertisements of the boys, like pictures of their face. And Matt, on his way back, he asked if he could have the one of Jay Briscoe, and they gave it to him. And he folded this, basically tent like thing up and got it in his luggage, and he brought it home. And one of the times they were on the road for Ring of Honor, they were staying in this one hotel, and Jamin happened to be walking across the courtyard, and Matt and Dalton Castle took this huge banner out and they unraveled it down the side of the building, off their terrace. And it was, like roof to ground. It was huge. It was like 4 stories, 5 stories. It's just a big, Jay Briscoe's face. And that, you know, that's, I think, for my generation, what amounted to a rib, but it was good hearted and everybody laughed. And Jamin, God rest his soul, you know, yeah, that's one of my favorites that I've heard. And it's not really a rib, but it's a great story.
Oh, so it's like a friendly type of thing. But like Jay
Yeah,
Briscoe, yeah, Jay Briscoe was a really good worker in some ways, but man, he had a different style of wrestling. Then you have Mark who still wrestles. But what was it like working with the Briscoes?
it was always a, an absolute pleasure. It was always an absolute pleasure, and they were there wasn't a lot of daylight, and that's how I like it. I likened working with the Briscoes. Was like playing a football game. They brought it, and I feel like we were similar. I was similar. Kyle was similar. Other like, so it was a pleasure, because they were very giving, but they were also gonna, maybe knock your teeth out. You don't know. Both super athletic, both great workers, and both amazing human beings. Amazing human beings. And obviously the passing of Jay was difficult and whatnot, but I will say this, and I will go on record, to see the way that Mark and Mr. Briscoe and Mrs. Briscoe, to see the way that they handled everything, it was such inspiration for me when it comes to my own faith, because they really, it was indescribable, the amount of faith that they have shown, and still to this day Mark shows. Like, he knows that Jay's in a better place, Jamin's in a better place, and that's a faith that, like, I'm trying to develop as best I can. I'm way further ahead than I was at other points in my life, but that was inspiring shit. I lost a brother too, a few years ago, and it's tough. And to watch the grace with which Mark Briscoe handled it, and it continues to handle it, is it's mind boggling to me.
Yeah, it's tough, I've lost a brother a couple years myself, and it's kind of been one of those difficult years. What, like, as an individual, I didn't play the big time leads, but playing at that game, there was a time I should have just spent time and go see my brother for the last time. But in my brother's spirit, he didn't want me to go out there. He wanted me to go play. He said, "Dude,
Hmm.
no, just play."
Hmm.
That was what he always told me, and I always took that to the day. So it's like
Yeah.
he was a big inspiration to me. He would always motivate me. He would always get tough on me, but sometimes you have to learn how to adjust. And
Hmm.
Mark Briscoe, like, I always thought he had a good sense of humor character. Like, he had this thing called the Kung Fu Red, or the Redneck Kung Fu.
Yeah.
Or that
Yeah. Redneck
shit
Kung
was
Fu.
funny. It was funny as hell. Like, I ain't gonna
Well,
lie, I think his
yeah.
character is the best.
Well, I mean, let's look at pro wrestling as what it is. Like, we're trying to make you feel an emotion, and that emotion can be that you're scared, that you're pissed, that you're happy, or that you're laughing your ass off. So Mark was very good at having that balance. I think that was some of the most fun Kyle and I had together, was laughing and doing shit that wasn't martial arts and kick ass, and it was kind of a nice dichotomy. And I think that's what makes Mark so special, is that he can be the butt of the joke, he can have fun, he will stand there in the crane kick position that Ralph Macchio made famous in the Karate Kid, and do his redneck kung fu. But then he'll also, almost remove your head from your shoulders with a clothesline. So I think that dichotomy is attractive. Yeah, I know it is to me. I know I enjoy that.
I mean, personality wise, the style of wrestling, that's what he brought to the table. But his brother was at least, I mean, Jay was at least a solid competitor. At least he had some top titles and all the other matches. He was like
Jay was one of one, man. Jay,
one of a kind.
Yeah, and Jay could have Jay could have headlined WrestleMania.
He was kind of like the Undertaker version of it a little bit like the Undertaker, but just like the indie version of them.
If some breaks went a different way, Mark and Jay would have been would have worked WrestleMania. These are guys that talent. It certainly was not for a lack of talent as to why they didn't get there, and the same can be said for a few talents, but like Mark and Jay, hands down to me. But it also kind of makes sense. It's almost poetic justice that they were the stalwarts, truly the stalwarts of Ring of Honor. Like they were there from basically the inception, and they were there when they closed the doors. And now you have Ring of Honor, obviously with AEW, and it's still alive. It's not done for sure, but with the unfortunate circumstances with Jay, the Briscoes as a unit and as a thing were just they were as Ring of Honor as it got.
Oh, wait, I'm right here. Guess something kind of went frozen a little bit.
Oh, that's okay. No worries, man.
Yeah, we're good, man. So what were we gonna say? You were saying about the Briscoes and all the wrestling stuff.
Just that the Briscoes were, they were one of one, and they were. It was almost poetic justice that they were with Ring of Honor as long as they were. It also speaks to who they were as human beings. Both, just they come from great stock when you see their family and their parents, and then you realize that's where their loyalty came from. And that's, if they were nothing else, they were loyal. If you were friends with Mark or Jay, and something was going down, they had your back, and you didn't have to look far to know that. So just good human beings, and great wrestlers.
Yeah, great tag team individuals. They were great singles in some ways. I mean, I've seen a lot of the ROH matches. I've seen a lot of classics with Jay Briscoe. He was kind of like, I would say he was like technically the top guy.
Not even technically. He was
at least like one of those top guys.
When I came into Ring of Honor and got my first contract, and Kyle and I, we actually were fortunate enough to win our first tag titles in Ring of Honor from the Briscoes. Jay, at that time, I believe, had already had the world title and then got back to the world title. Jay was, and that was his reward for being such, being who he was, and yet still being in Ring of Honor as long as he was, because there were other options. And they were loyal as the day is long, and talented as the day is long, and they were who you saw. They were a couple chicken farmers from Maryland, from Sandy Fork, from Sandy Fork, from Delaware. They were, I'm sorry, no, not Maryland. I always think Maryland because that's
it's like close
Ring
to
of Honor was Baltimore when they were Sinclair. It was Baltimore, Maryland, and it was so close to Sandy Fork.
Yeah, I think it's in the border of Maryland because I looked up the location. It's in Delaware, but it's in the border of Maryland.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense. But yeah, Jay was top dog. When I came into Ring of Honor, there was no question who the top dog was. The only thing that would have potentially made him like less top dog would be that in a lot of other cases, whether it be Ring of Honor or other promotions, the top dog had to let everybody know he was the top dog, and he would go around, marking his territory and kind of being an insecure whatever. Jay was not that. Jay would have, if you asked Jay at the height of his run, hey, we don't have anybody to sweep the ring. Like, he would have been in the ring with a broom before you could get the sentence out. That's who he was. And that's what made him as special as he was. And to this day, one of my most cherished friendships in this industry. Yeah, man. I mean, just a amazing human being, like an amazing worker, amazing wrestler, but it paled in comparison to who he was as a man.
So he was a really good human being outside the ring and a good worker. So we look at that and appreciate those guys that did it in the business but died too soon. I mean, that was just tragedy that he went through a car accident, like, at the time. That caught me by surprise.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't remember if the person that hit him, it was a head-on collision. I believe they swerved into his lane. I don't remember I'm going to stop myself there because I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to go. I don't want to get
details and whatnot, but
I don't want to go right towards there. But I understand.
Jay was a father. Had his some of his children in the car. And he was doing dad things. He was doing what dads do, and unfortunately, God had a different plan.
God had a different plan, but man, hey, you're still doing it. But hey, I definitely appreciate your time, bro. We've been going on for an hour, and I know you probably got some stuff to do. I know you probably got some stuff going on, but
yeah, I got a wife, I got dinner.
I don't want to hold you up too long, man. But it was a lot of fun doing. Definitely down the near future, I'll definitely want to get you back on, man.
Please let me know, sir.
Yeah, and for everybody else, man, tell everybody where they can find your social media platform and all that stuff, and then
on Instagram, I'm the Bobby Fish. On Twitter, same handle, the Bobby Fish. For merchandise, apparel, and whatnot, it's bobbyfishapparel.com. We have the Undisputed podcast with Bobby Fish. We drop that on Wednesdays. Every Wednesday it drops. It's on every platform, wherever you choose to go to get your podcasts. We're there. That's what are they? Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple. They're on all. We are on all of them. That is a lot of fun to do. Really enjoying that. I have some independent wrestling bookings coming up. I know one is in August for Apple City Wrestling. I will also be at Atomic Legacy Wrestling in Orlando. And then in September, a couple more. I know one of them, I'm going to be in Costa Rica.
So, Costa Rica, interesting.
Yeah, gonna get some flyer miles on that trip. Yeah, I'm doing a actual in August. Towards the end of the month, I'm gonna do a DDP yoga session at the House of Glory Wrestling in Wrestling Academy in Orlando, Florida. I am technically a DDP yoga instructor in training. By then, I may have my cert. We will see, but I'm qualified. I promise. And this will
you're gonna be a license, so you'll be all right.
yeah. And then got a couple seminars coming up. Doing a seminar in September that will be at the House of Glory, same place. So yeah, I'm staying busy.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. And thank you for your contribution for wrestling. You're still doing it, so I'm looking forward to seeing
more to come.
More to come, man.
More to come, sir.
You're still currently doing it, so I gotta check out those matches. But for sure, man, thank you for your time, and for everybody else, thank you guys for tuning in.